sparks, they're gonna fly. There's beauty in the making when you're taking your time. Sure as heck beats working 9 to 5. It's easy when you love it and you're busy living that sharp life. It's easy when you love it and you're busy living that sharp life. Yeah, it's easy when you love it and you're busy living that sharp life. All right.
In this episode, we're going to explore the design of the knife, the anatomy, basically how a liner lock knife works. I do want to make a mention of Michael Walker, who invented the liner lock, and I consider it to be one of the strongest and best forms of locking a pocket knife. And it's one that I've used exclusively since designing my first pocket knives in about 1985 or 6. With the help of Michael Walker. So thank you, Michael. The design of a knife, the shape, the size, the kind of point it's going to have, how it fits in the hand, the materials to be used, are a very personal thing. People like some ideas, some other people like other ideas, some people like certain shapes, other people don't like those shapes. That's not my concern. My concern is designing a knife that you like and that you think is going to fit your needs and maybe even be profitable. Maybe, maybe not. In any event, when I decided to design a tactical knife, I was thinking about a knife which is used on a daily basis by truckers, packers, riggers, people who have to cut cardboard, who open packages, who have to cut rope, and also in a defensive mode, policemen, military people, some sort of a defensive mode. So I tried to incorporate both utility and defense into the design. So I came up with the ATCF, the Advanced Technology Combat Folder. And I decided on certain elements before I started the design that I wanted to incorporate in my design. And the ATCF has a 4-inch blade, which I consider to be pretty much optimal in terms of both defense and utility. I wanted to have a comfortable handle, and I made the handle only of titanium. I didn't put any scale materials on at the beginning. It was just a perfectly utilitarian, easy to carry around, relatively lightweight knife. So I had the 4-inch blade, and it comes out to about a 5 1/4 inch handle. I wanted to have a pocket clip to make it easy to carry around and take out and deploy with one hand. I wanted to have a way of opening it with one hand. And I came up with the design of the thumb disc. The thumb disc allows either hand to open up the knife relatively quickly with just the thumb action. Because ordinarily, when you're going to be cutting something, you're often holding it in your hand. So you want to be able to open your knife with one hand, and when you're finished cutting, you want to be able to close it and put it back in your pocket and get it out of the way. So these were the basic elements in terms of the design, and I wanted to incorporate, in addition to those, some sort of protection. And the way I did it was I added a ramp for the thumb up at the top and a matching angled ramp down at the bottom. And what this serves as is a finger protection as well as a thumb protection and kind of a guard. It's a guard on a folding knife. Ordinarily you see them on fixed blades. This is on a folding knife. So having come up with those design parameters, which was my own personal preference, I would like to go into the anatomy and the some of the theory behind the liner lock and the folding knife. So in terms of the anatomy of the knife, here's kind of an X-ray picture. Of course, the blade. This is a pivot point. All measurements come from that pivot point. We'll take the length of the blade, the length of the handle, the distance from top and bottom, all measured from the center of the pivot point. The stop pin is essential in keeping the blade open when it's deployed, also closed in the proper position. The ball bearing detent snaps into a hole in the blade and keeps it closed when you're not using it, keeping it in your pocket. And this point right here is the contact point between the spring and the blade. Very important point, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. Of course, you need a spacer to separate the front of the knife from the back of the knife and keeping the blade centered in the middle. So that's basically the anatomy and the X-ray picture of a liner lock. And I want to go back a little bit. In the last episode, I mentioned high school geometry, and I'm going to talk just a little bit about that. The strength of the liner lock, basically the strength of any lock, but particularly the liner lock, is based on the triangle. And it's the point between the stop pin, the pivot, and the contact between the blade and the spring that form a triangle. This triangle, which is the strongest form in nature, is what prevents the blade from closing when a force is applied to the top of the blade. And you don't want that to happen because that could be pretty dangerous. And the reason why that works so well is because when the blade is forced downward, it creates a force of compression against the spring, and the spring forces the blade forward. Compression point here, compression point up at the pivot, and compression point at the stop pin. So these points forming the triangle are what make the liner lock one of the strongest locks in nature. This is an illustration of basically what I've been just talking about. Excessive force downward on the top of the blade will provide a compression force against the spring. And the spring, which is a long piece of, in this case, titanium, can deform, but it won't fail. And that is paramount in the safety of any kind of a pocket knife. I mentioned before that this point of contact is extremely important because that's the place where the force is applied. And the larger this distance, the stronger it will be. Now that's going to be determined by the width of the hand and the comfort that you're looking for, but we always try to get a maximum distance between the contact point and the center of the pivot. Now I mentioned the stop pin as being that element that prevents the blade from opening up too far or closing too far and forming the third point of a triangle. The stop pins that I use are what's known as shoulder pins. They have a shoulder on one side and a shoulder on the other so that they'll fit between the two sides with the spacer. For my knife, and this is only mine, remember I'm doing Terzuola ATCF. My stop pins in Terzuola knives, I make them myself. They have a shoulder of 9/64 on each side, and 5/32 in the center. And this center point is what goes between the two sides of the knife. And the shoulders keep it from moving and rattling on either side. So once again, going back to the stop pin, which is located right there, the blade has to open and it has to close, which means it has to pass by that stop pin without bumping into it until it reaches this point and this point on the blade. So it's got clearance here, which allows the blade to swing freely from the closed to the open position. This radius on the blade allows the blade to pass by the stop pin completely as it's closing and as it's opening. Lastly, on this part, I'm going to show this is what really keeps the whole thing together. We've got a spacer in the back. We've got the stop pin. Remember I said it was a shoulder pin, 2 shoulders. And the blade. And I'm using washers. Washers prevent the blade from rubbing against the titanium sides. These parts fit into the handle and form that part of the knife, which is the grip, and allows you to manipulate the knife, open it, close it, and keep it in your pocket. So now that we've reviewed some of the essential elements in a knife, especially a liner locked folding knife, let's start designing. Hope you guys have pencils and papers ready, because we're going to start making some drawings. And I've got my trusty drawing board. And basically, I start all of my knives with a drawing, with a pencil. I use sometimes graph paper, sometimes not graph paper, but just have fun. Just have fun drawing and coming up with designs and shapes and what you think would be comfortable in your hand, and hopefully not too much like anybody else's knife, but something of your own, something that satisfies you in terms of design and what you think would be comfortable and functional and something you'd be proud to carry in your pocket. So if you're going to be designing a knife, that's the way we start. Just sketching, lines, whatever you think might work out. Now, the way I work is I do a design, come up with a design that I like, make sure it fits in terms of size and so forth, and I make a copy of it. This is the original of the ATCF. And I drew this with my 4-inch blade that I was looking for, and 4 3/4-inch handle, 5 and a little bit maybe, but I boiled it down to 4 3/4, and it works out very nicely. There's only one hard and fast rule that you have to follow. Generally, when you're sketching and designing and drawing, there are no rules. You can make whatever you want. Big blade, small blade, big handle, small handle, tanto, spear point, Warncliffe, whatever you want, whatever looks good. But there is only one rule to follow in terms of the design, and that is that the distance between the center of the pivot and the point of the knife has to fit within the handle from the center of the pivot to the back of the knife. This way, when the blade is closed, swinging around, it's shrouded by the rear end of the handle. That's the only rule you've got to follow, and the only one that really makes any kind of sense. So once you've got a drawing of a knife that you like, that fits well, the handle is the right size compared to the blade is the shape you like, make 2 copies. And I'm going to show you why we make 2 copies. First of all, I want to save this. I don't want to ruin it. So this gets put into the safety file. And I make 2 photocopies, both of them exactly the same, of the original. And take my trusty scissors. And I cut out, first of all, the blade. You don't have to be accurate, doesn't have to be really clean. Just get the blade out of the paper. So I'm cutting out the shape of the blade. It's like something out of Mr. Rogers. You'd find something like this on children's Sesame Seat television. So now I have the whole blade without the handle. This is now garbage. Next operation, use the scissors to cut out the handle part. And these drawings are going to become patterns. And these are the patterns we're going to use to make the blade and the handle. So we now have 2 pieces of paper. They're a little bit thin and flimsy to use as patterns, so what I do is I glue them onto a stiff board. It could be a piece of Kydex. It could be a piece of fiberboard that we use for spacing material. Something that's relatively hard, that can be cut and shaped relatively easily. The only careful thing to look at is that towards the back, leave a little extra. We're going to have to play with that part later. Otherwise, we're going to cut this out on the bandsaw, and then I'm going to grind the shape so we have 2 finished patterns. And this is what we're going to make the blade and the handle out of. Blade out of steel, handle out of titanium. Wait a minute. Did I hear somebody say, no, don't say that? That we don't do this kind of work nowadays with the super high technology and CAD drawings and computers and... Wait a minute, are you kidding me? This is the way I've been doing it from the beginning. You don't believe me? Okay. I want you to take a look at my analog CAD file. And this I've been saving for quite a few years. And this has drawings, and it's got models and patterns of handles, some of them out of plastic. I've been using clear plastic too, and blade shapes. And sometimes I can take one shape, put it onto another handle, take one handle, put it onto another blade. We've got a completely different knife. So yes, in this day and age, there are people who don't use CAD, who don't use computers or high tech, but still come up with designs that function and are really, really nice looking. Hope you guys can do the same. Enjoy the design. So now that we have a design that we like and makes us happy, we're going to take the drawings that are already glued onto some hardboard of some sort. And in the next episode, we're going to cut them out on the bandsaw. We're going to go over to the grinders and grind them down to shape what we call the profiles. And we're going to use these to begin the process of making an ATCF liner lock. And in the next episode, maybe we'll throw in a little bit of Terzuola shop philosophy also. So that'll be in episode 4. I'm proud to have Burr King as one of the sponsors for this series. I've made all my knives on the 3 Burr Kings in my shop since 1986.
It's pedal to the metal, keeping on that grind. Gotta keep it moving, never looking behind the story. It's the blade and the sparks, they gonna fly. There's beauty in the making when you're taking your time. Sure as it beats working 9 to 5. It's easy when you love it and you're busy living that sharp life.